Hey everyone, Can't Overdo It here with a new video. In this video, I'm going to sit down and rank all the media that I consumed over the month of October 2024. Full disclosure, I wanted this to come out like way earlier. Like, I'm talking weeks ago, but with the move setting me back and the new job and working on the house, I had a little bit of reacclimating to do. So, I mean, better late than never, I guess. But yeah, my bad.
Now, I think it's important to mention that I've been doing these mosaics since around like January of 2023. But, now that my voice is on the internet from the other video, I figured, screw it. I'll just turn them into videos. This intro will be longer than future ones so that I can just kind of lay the foundation for what the other ones are going to look like. So, if you don't really care about that and you just kind of want to get to the yapping, I have timestamps below so you can skip to the ranking. But if you want to get the bigger picture, then, here you are. Firstly, I had bigger aspirations for this originally, but when I started like doing the logistics of it and how much time it was going to take for me to do what I wanted to do, I I reminded of kind of the reason that I made this channel in the first place, and in particular named myself Can't Overdo It. So for the large majority of you that don't know, the reason I named myself Can't Overdo It was because I wanted to put myself in a position to where if I were fortunate enough to have any sort of audience, that I wouldn't kind of let that get to my head. I wouldn't start making these super incredibly high quality productions that were going to take me hours upon hours and hours, which I mean, some of those edits have, but I never wanted it to become something that I made feel like a job. And I feel like I've done a very good job of maintaining that throughout. When I was going through the process of originally, you know, getting this video out, it felt like a job, man. I would come home from my 12, 13-hour shift. I would walk the dogs and then I would come inside and start editing, but I didn't like it, right? So these videos are going to be incredibly basic. There's not going to be a lot of editing in the same form how my normal edits don't have a crazy amount of special effects and super awesome gadgets and gizmos and stuff. So these are going to be more so kind of for background noise, to be completely honest with you. These aren't going to be super interesting visually speaking, so just kind of put this on in the background and listen to me out if you feel like it. And if you don't feel like it, then I mean, what are you doing here? There's go watch some of my edits, I guess. Secondly, the actual criteria. What does a series need to be on this list in the first place, and what does it mean for one series to be listed above another? So for what constitutes as an entry, it's really my own prerogative. It's going to be subjective, and there will probably be times where I'm hypocritical about it, where sometimes I'll include something that I probably shouldn't, and vice versa. But generally speaking, it's when I have consumed a substantial part of a series, or at least a substantial part that I consider to be worthy of its own place on this list, whether it be a story arc or multiple story arcs, depending on the length of them, manhwa, manga, light novels, visual novels, web novels, all that kind of good stuff you can expect to see on this list. You're not going to see pretty much any live action stuff probably ever. I do consume some live action media, contrary to popular belief, but it's really just like competition reality shows like Big Brother, Survivor, The Challenge, and going from talking about Doki Doki Literature Club to the currently airing Survivor 47 would be just so bizarre. So at the very least, for the time being, I'm not going to include that kind of stuff. If you guys do want to see that kind of stuff in the future, then I'll consider it. But I'm going to keep it mostly anime and manga focused because that's like my content, and I don't really want to branch out too much. But as for what makes a series quote unquote higher than another, there's really not an answer to that. The way that I personally rank series is completely subjective, and these lists are going to be no different. As we go down the list talking about these entries, they'll have impacted me more and more and more throughout. Like, while I am kind of like the writing guy on here, I'm very much so of the opinion that a well written story isn't equivalent to favoritism. I absolutely adore The House in Fata Morgana. I think it is, in my personal opinion, from what I have read, the best story ever written. It's like barely in my top 20 series of all time on a personal level. So, with that being said, it's not like writing is going to play absolutely zero factor on these lists, more so just that it isn't going to play a very big one despite uh, my channel being literally nothing but writing. So I didn't really consume all that much content this month, but the worst piece of media for me is unfortunately the Sloth If story of ReZero. Let me get this out of the way first. I love ReZero. It's in my top 5 series of all time. Subaru is my second favorite protagonist of all time, with probably the highest character peak ever in chapter 74 of the Arc 6 web novel. And it's also my second favorite isekai collectively ever, behind Konosuba, which I've read every light novel for and have the main cast as my favorite main cast in fiction. With all that out of the way, the Sloth If in particular was just so boring. I really don't like that that's the word that I have to use for it, but it fits. The Gluttony and the Lust Ifs, which I read a couple months ago because it took me a couple months to get through Sloth, told a narrative of, definitely varying qualities in a short amount of time. I think that the Gluttony If works better for the sake of example because the Lust If is, the Lust If. But Gluttony told a narrative in a concise way that still made sense. It took an interesting concept and made it work in a respectable amount of time. Sloth also had an interesting concept, probably the most interesting concept out of any of the If stories, at least out of the ones that I've read so far. And I only heard about the If stories because of the Sloth If. After I watched ReZero for the first time, I was talking to a buddy about it. Shout out to Ryan. And he told me, he was like, yeah, man, if you want to, there's these If stories that the author wrote that are, technically not canon, but the author wrote it as like the what ifs. What if Rem and Subaru ran off halfway through season 1? I was like, wow, that is awesome. Like on a conceptual level, that's great. But I waited years to read it because he also told me later, he was like, yeah, there's one of the If stories that takes place during Arc 6. So if you want to read all the If stories back to back to back, just wait until you finish that. And I was like, you know what? I'll just do that. That makes sense to me. So I held out reading The Sloth If until I got through Arc 6. And now, with that context, imagine my disappointment, right? I am not being hyperbolic when I tell you that The Sloth If, a side story, is as long as, if not longer than, one of the actual light novels of ReZero. And as somebody who has read admittedly too many light novels, those in particular are already pretty damn long, right? Truthfully, despite this being the Rem route where, Sugar and Rem get their happily ever after, the only real intrigue that I found from the Sloth If, and the only reason that I view it even I think I have it at like a 6 out of 10, was Tia and Pollybell, who were both introduced to me through this side story. Look, I know it sounds like I'm pissed off, which, I was, but I like ReZero. But this is probably the worst content of it that I've read outside of maybe that one Liliana perspective chapter in Arc 5. That one, that was rough. But there's definitely some bias here, right? I was looking forward to this for so long, and it just did not land at all. So yeah, it's biased, but it's my list, so I'm putting it at the very bottom. But yeah, man, if I could describe it in one word, it's so disappointing, man. Now at number 7, I've got The Deep Sea of Words. It's a short one-shot manga, which admittedly, out of all of the entries on this list, this is going to be the shortest one in conjunction with it being the shortest like actual entry on here. I don't want to get super into it because like it's a one shot. Just read it. It took me like I think 20 minutes max to read. But what I can say positively about it is that it did what any good one shot does. It made me give a damn about a story in a super short amount of time. I liked it. I enjoyed it. But I mean, realistically, putting this above literally anything else was just impossible to justify. It does a good job of telling the story of grief, and there's really not a whole lot more to say about it. It did not overstay its welcome like a certain other entry on this list, but again, like putting this any higher is ridiculous. Moving on to number 6, I have the story quest of Honkai Star Rail Update 2.6. I have an inherent bias towards anything HSR related since it's one of my favorite games ever. But, sticking to the patch and the story this time around, for me, it gets hard carried by Rappa and her backstory specifically. We'll get into that later. Boot Hill's backstory was also pretty cool to see. The main trio of Trailblazer, March, and Don Hung were their usual funny and consistent selves. I actually quite liked Dr. Rekka. I thought that he was interesting. But the actual main big batch this time was super weak, in my opinion. Like, especially considering what we got with the original Penacony arc and even the second Jianzhou Lofu arc. The pacing of this patch was also, like, pretty abysmal. And, I know I'm being, like, super negative about it right now, but it's mostly because I want to just highlight Rapid and justify the placement. So, spoilers ahead. Rappa's backstory is essentially her entire character being based on a manga. It's something that like I originally found super comical since this entire update kind of had a more whimsical feel to it. But as time went on and the backstory got more and more in depth, I started viewing it more through the lens of a tragedy. And when I started looking at it that way, I started to feel a lot more connected to her on a personal level. Her entire fascination with ninjas and quote the way of the ninja is something that, whilst it can be a little bit annoying at times, admittedly, it's equally something that genuinely endeared me to her and made me want to learn more about her. This human experiment who was, I mean, brought up as a manga character, pretty much. Like, that's cool. That's an interesting concept, and I like what they did with it. But at the end of the day, is it enough to really like make this patch truly elite? No. It is the best part. Rappa's backstory and the emotional baggage that came with that. And, as much as I shit on the art overall, like it's still quality Honkai Star Rail content, despite probably being the worst story section outside of Rappa's backstory. In any case, it lands at number 6 on this list. The fifth best piece of media for me this month was honestly kind of a toss up, but at number 5, I ended up landing on the Wrath If of ReZero. And rejoice, ReZero fans, I liked the Wrath If quite a bit, actually. To try to sum up the Wrath If for the uninitiated, it basically asks, the question we've all wondered ourselves. What if Subaru just went completely fucking insane? Before the events of Arc 6 that led down the gluttony path, at least, um, in Wrath, Subaru is just so different. The entire aura around this if just feels so off-putting. I'm not gonna spoil the ending here, but this whole path really feels like a bad end, especially considering Amelia's involvement towards the like actual ending of the Wrath If. It was just so strange, guys. Like I mentioned this in my post about it, but reading through this gave me that exact same feeling of reading that one Miasma chapter in Arc 6. If you know, you know, but damn, that was honestly hard to read. Holly Bell was cool in this segment, just as he was in Sloth. I really liked his appearance throughout. Frederica also had a few really good moments sprinkled throughout, which I wasn't really expecting. And yeah, I'm not gonna say his name. I'm gonna butcher it. I don't even know how to say his name. Blue Lightning guy, strongest guy in Wallachia, I think it's pronounced. He was really cool. He was really funny. I'm definitely interested to see more of him in the coming arcs. You know, once I finish all the If stories and the EX volumes, before I can finally experience Arc 7. Amelia, I kind of alluded to her before, but she was definitely interesting here. Whether that's a good or bad thing, I couldn't really tell you. And honestly, pretty much the same thing goes for the glorious Purge King himself. I really like this take on Subaru. It's probably my favorite take on Subaru out of the If stories, and I mean, in general, my favorite If story overall so far. I haven't read Pride or Greed yet. I'm going to be reading Pride next, and then I'm saving Greed for last. Both of these have been super hyped up for me, though, so we'll see if Wrath is still my favorite by the end of it. But yeah, I really like the Wrath If. Looking forward to reading more Greed Zero. I'm probably not going to be reading Pride or Greed this month. But we'll see. And yeah, for now it's number 5. Finally, breaking into the top half of the list, I have Playing Death Games to Put Food on the Table, Volume 1, and wow, that title's long. I'm going to call it Death Games because that's so much easier. This entry is particularly difficult to talk about. One, in the sense that it's a death game. So, similarly to Danganronpa or Your Turn to Die, it's really difficult to talk about while avoiding spoilers. And two, because I'm recording this way later than I should have. I have already finished volume 2 at this point, so I'm gonna try to not let that affect my assessment too much, but I just figured that it was worth mentioning. First, I'm gonna give a spoiler-free review, and then I'm gonna be jumping into spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled, use the timestamps to skip ahead once I mention the spoiler talk. Like I'll make it very clear. If you've already read it, good shit, enjoy. And if you don't care, nah, man, can't really stop you. But I do recommend the series, so definitely, you know, don't spoil yourself, please. Let me start the actual discussion by talking about the narrative structure, which I thoroughly enjoyed here. It takes a very unique approach where, for reasons, our white haired heterochromia having stoic protagonist Yuki Sorimachi has a dream of clearing 99 death games in a world where death games are normal. The story, though, takes advantage of this, showing us Yuki's journey not chronologically whilst maintaining the narrative through line, showing us these death games in a, I mean, seemingly random but not super random order. This volume starts us on her 28th game and then bounces us back to her ninth. And the ninth game was far better than the 28th. The introduction to the story is neat. It kind of just throws the reader into this world, and the protagonist is really easy to root for, especially towards the end of the novel. The characters are all good on the whole, and the world building with stuff like the preservation treatment is just really cool. So yeah, I'm gonna start spoiling now. Like I said, just skip to the timestamp below for number 3. All right, Kinko. Why? Why did this have to happen? Like, I get it, especially with the context of Volume 2 and why Yuki has the mindset that she does in this scene, but it's just not fair, man. Like, full disclosure, before reading Candlewood, Kinko was, like, legitimately my favorite character. I found her to be definitely the best non Yuki character in Ghost Tales, with everyone else being just kind of fine, I guess. But the real draw of this volume is definitely Candlewoods, and when I praise this volume, I'm mostly talking about Candlewoods. I really like the intro here with Moegi and how she got all of her soldiers in line. I thought it did wonders for her characterization, especially later learning that she was essentially Kiara's student. That was really cool. And speaking of Kiara, the whole Kiara versus Yuki fight was really well done. I was thoroughly invested throughout all of it, especially at the point in the fight where Yuki found her motivation to essentially take on Hakushi's dream, and now we can talk about Hakushi, who is still very much so wrapped in a veil of mystery. Like, I'm sorry. I get that there's some wild shit going on with body modification in this series. That was very clear with Kiara, as well as certain other folk in Volume 2. But just how the hell did Hakushi survive? I don't get it. But, anyways, like, the last line from Hakushi, where she says that Yuki's a phantom and that curses don't work on phantoms, dude, that was just so cool, man. I look forward to whatever chapter she comes back in where Yuki learns that Hakushi actually isn't dead, which unfortunately I kind of feel like won't happen until the end game of the series. And now, for the story that some of you who I won't name have been asking me to review for way too long, I have the first few arcs of Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. Firstly, I've only read up to chapter 66 in the webtoon, which puts me just past the Capture the Flag and War of Kings arc. Just wanted to get that out of the way real quick. Let's talk some ORV. So, on a conceptual level, I already absolutely love this. I adore the concept of a guy who read this entire web novel only to be transported into it. And as far as how the story executes this idea, so far it's been done pretty well. I find Dokcha to be a pretty fun lead character, and the general cast is also pretty good, especially Hiwon, whose name I probably just butchered. And real quick, I have to talk about this, so this is a bit of a segue. To absolutely no fault of the story itself, it's just really hard for me to remember the character names. See, I'm used to reading and watching Japanese media, so things like arigato or daijobu are things that I look at and can instantly recognize. Taking that and being thrown into a Korean media, the names are obviously going to be a bit different in nature, and it's been really difficult for me to personally have a genuine grasp on the characters at large because of that, when I'm not actively reading it at least. The introductory arc was instantly a great hook for the series, and I mean, honestly, like, my thoughts on ORV generally consist of, yeah, I like it. I'm excited to read more. Currently, it's my number one manhwa priority, but I'm also not prioritizing manhwa at all at the moment. I'll probably read at least to the next arc by the end of the year, so you can expect me to yap about that at some point. And eventually, once I do catch up to the manhwa chapters, I will be moving over to the novel version. I can discuss that at length whenever I get there, but probably not going to be anytime super soon, as I have a long way to go and I have a lot of other series to get through as well. So I like ORV. I'm excited to read more of it. Now, starting out the top two, and I mean, like I said earlier, I knew the top two coming into this list. The only question was the order. And to my own surprise, at number two, I'm going with Classroom of the Elite, Year 2, Volume 12. For those of you who don't know, Classroom of the Elite is my personal favorite series of all time. Not going to get into why right now. I'll save that for some other time. But because of that, there's obviously a huge amount of bias towards its content, which definitely boons it on this list. And for that reason, I expected it to be my easy number one. But as for Year 2, Volume 12 in particular, I really enjoyed it a lot. Admittedly, the special exam this time around took a bit for me to really have a firm grasp on what the hell was even happening. But as the story progressed, it just kind of clicked for me. And after that, I enjoyed the exam itself. Hanami Ichigotne absolutely obliterating potential girl Suzune Hora Midkita was great. And then, I mean, then the Koji stuff happened, and as a Hanami elitist, that was rough. But speaking of that, I mentioned this in my community post after I read the novel. I like Koji so much because of his psychological complexities, because of his hypocritical nature, because of his contradictory nature. But sometimes I just like to see him school everyone, and this volume did exactly that. He single handedly bodied this exam, and it was fun to read through. Admittedly, the second half of this volume was significantly better than the first, but it was still really good throughout. And again, I have bias. I admit it. I'm not going to change the way I do these mosaics with the pressure of other people watching. So yeah, Year 2 Volume 12 is my number two spot on here, and I'm looking forward to 12.5. And at number one, the single greatest piece of media that I consumed over the month of October 2024, in my own correct opinion, is Karuhana, The Fragrant Flower Blooms with Dignity. All right, so I went into this manga expecting to like it. What I did not expect was to like it as much as I did. For the uninitiated, delinquent boy, super nice girl, super nice. They're super nice to each other, despite the fact that they go to schools that hate one another. That's the super basic premise of the story. But really, what this story encapsulates so well is taking these characters and crafting and molding them into genuine, believable people. People with flaws, and more importantly, people that overcome these highlighted flaws. I think that the best way that the story does that is through repeated use of good backstories. To me, a good backstory is one that will A, make me sympathetic to the character, and B, show some sort of parallelism to the current happenings of a story. Characters like Jacopo Berzatti and Psyche Callista massively shot up on my list after reading through their backstories because I was like, oh damn, That's some incredible backstories. I even talked about this earlier with Rappa, who I know that I'm now comparing Jacopo Versace to Rappa and Psyche Callista, but I digress. Backstories can do incredible things for characters, and they do that here. The entire main cast gets some sort of backstory, and those backstories are all fleshed out and directly impact their current motivations of the story, like a good backstory would. With that being said, right after talking about something the series does the best, I do think it's really important to acknowledge what the series may do the worst. And I say may because it's complicated. If you do not like melodrama, don't read this. Genuinely pass on this. If you don't like melodrama, you're not going to like this. Because there is a lot of melodramatic scenes in this manga. Personally, I'm not a super big fan of melodrama, although I don't necessarily mind it either, hence to my general consistent enjoyability of the series. But if you don't like it, you're not going to like the story. I'm sorry. Let's get back to the good though, because the entire main cast is great. Yorita's great, Saku's great, Rentaro's great, Wagadi is great. Genuinely, all four of these characters mean a lot to me, at least on some level. I think that Rentaro does a really good job of being a consistently rootable figure. Wagadi is, I mean, she's just Wagadi, right? Like she's just an enjoyable, fluffy presence. Kind of just reminds me of Kubo from Kubo Won't Let Me Be Invisible, which is my favorite manga ever. And when I God eventually do like a top character list on one of these videos, you can probably expect Wagadi and Kubo to be, if not right next to each other, definitely like within the same vicinity. Saku is just such a mood, man. There are times where I'm reading Saku quotes where I'm just like, yeah, this guy, he gets it. And Yorita was very interesting for a large part of the story, mainly because of how smoked in mystery his character was. But again, going back to the backstory thing, once his backstory got revealed, I was like, oh wow, he's actually a good character. This is awesome. I'm glad. But okay, I'll stop with all the fluff and the stalling. You guys know what this story's really about, right? It's not about the melodrama. It's not about the main two leads and their romantic development. I know. Spoilers, romantic development in a romance manga. Who would have thought? Let's talk about Subaru Hoshina, right? Oh my god, Subaru Hoshina. So I think that it says a lot of the fact that Subaru is technically not a main character, right? I mean, obviously, like she's part of the main crew, but she's really like the tritagonist of the story. And despite that, she's the best character in the story, both in writing and in my personal opinion. Like, genuinely, I think that those characters who I was just talking about, Rentaro, Saku, Wagadi, and Yorita, like, they're all around the same spot on my character list. Subaru is way higher than me. I think by at least like 20 spots or so. Like, it's the difference is kind of insane. But why do I like Subaru's character? And I'll get to the main reason in a minute. I just want to rapid fire some of the other ones. The message of her character is amazing. She steals the spotlight pretty much anytime she has an ounce of narrative significance. Her dynamic with Wagadi is just so great, and I really like her dynamic with Saku towards the end. Backstory again, I'm not going to get into it, but holy shit, the backstory is just really the first example in Karuhana of how they handle backstories, and it was just incredible. Honestly, the biggest reason that I like her character so much is because of a quote from her. And if you watched my Sayori versus Subaru Hoshina edit, it's the quote that I put for that. One day, I want to be able to love the me you fell in love with. And that quote hit me, man. There are a few quotes in anime, manga, and light novels and visual novels and all that that genuinely stick with me. Another one that really comes to mind is "You are an amazing guy, Natsuki Subaru." Like quotes like that will directly impact me, my thoughts about a character, obviously, because it gravitates me towards them. I'm not gonna get super personal on here because I don't want to get super personal on here. That's just how I am. I'm not an open book by any means. But to anybody else who has been in love and subsequently fallen out of love, I'm sure that there has, at least at some point throughout that love, been an experience in which you felt yourself inadequate, in the sense that you loved the person you loved more than you loved your own self, and that almost negligence can lead to a disastrously terrible and dark path. And that's really what Subaru's story to me is about. And I know it's kind of ironic because she's Subaru, but her story does, in a sense, mirror Subaru's, being this character who genuinely, to their core, hates who they are and wants to change, but not only wants to change, actively makes strides to change. And change is a very scary thing to everybody. We're humans. We don't like change. We like consistency. And Subaru actively goes against that, which is such a great thing. And her character just meant a lot to me. I really enjoyed her presence throughout. I found her to be super consistent. Like I said, steals the show every time she's on screen. Great backstory, great quotes, beautiful message, and genuinely, she is the reason that I put this at number one instead of Year Two, Volume 12. If it was not for Oshina, I would have probably gone the other way around. But she's really what made this manga for me, and I look forward to the rest of the manga because at the end of the day, the manga's not even over, and it's already my second favorite manga of all time, beside Kubo Won't Let Me Be Invisible, which I'll save that topic for another day. It's great. Go read it. I 100% recommend it, and it is the best piece of media that I read in the month of October this year.
Oh my god. It's finally over, guys. Um, so this is post-editing, can't overdo it here. The very first recording, like the first voice recording that you guys heard, the intro, was recorded at 2 o'clock this afternoon. At the time of this recording, it is 3 in the morning. No, it didn't take me 13 hours to do this. I kind of worked on it a little bit on and off throughout the day, and I also took a break to do that Subaru versus Sung Jin Woo edit. But for most of the day since I've been awake, I've been doing nothing but scripting and doing the voice recordings and then editing the voice recordings and putting together this little format that I have on screen, which I hope you guys didn't completely hate. This is probably going to be how it's going to look for these types of videos because, to be completely honest with you guys, it's pretty easy. It's monotonous. It is incredibly monotonous work doing it this way, but it is easy. It is almost too easy. It's kind of mind numbing at points. Just cutting the audio clips, and let me tell you, this experience has given me so much more respect for anybody who like actively produces videos because this sucked. But I do enjoy talking about all these series that I consume because I generally consume quite a lot of media. So I do want to keep doing these moving forward, and honestly, it's not like it's a crazy burden on me despite my complaining about it, because I had this mosaic idea since January of 2023, which I think I mentioned at the start of the video. So really all this is transferring that idea into a video format and just kind of talking about the series, which I enjoy doing. So these are here to stay. Hopefully, in the future, it doesn't take me two-thirds of the following month to talk about the previous one. I'm hoping to range it within a week or so. So, come December, hopefully, I can get my November video out in the first week or so. But, I mean, really, you never know. We'll see. I'm not gonna completely bust my balls over it or nothing. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I do hope that you guys enjoyed the video for what it's worth. Like, comment, subscribe, share, all the bullshit YouTube jargon. I really don't know what I'm doing here. Fun fact, all of the audio that was recorded for this video was through the Discord voice message system, including this one. So if the audio is a little bit jank here and there, don't worry about it. Blame Discord. Believe me, as somebody who just sat through for multiple hours listening to this audio over and over and over again, there were a lot of cuts because the audio just sucked at points. So I'm still using a TV as a monitor, by the way, because we're still working on the house and I don't have a proper bedroom right now. So again, I hope you guys liked it, and genuinely thank you guys all so much for the support with my video or with my voice now out on the internet. I am a lot more comfortable with doing more videos like this. So if you guys do have any suggestions, let me know down below. If you want me to like review series, go over the editing process, talk about the writing categories, talk about certain characters or series, any of that stuff, just let me know. But that's really about all I have planned. So as always, take care, y'all.